looking like breeze.
All right. All set?
I am ready.
There you go. That's the perfect distance, like right there.
Right there.
And then if you project, be a little bit louder than normal, that's good too. But, whatever, make yourself comfortable.
So I can read my scribble.
Your chicken scratch?
Yeah, well.
But Hello, and welcome to the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. My name is Chris Hayner, and I'm an enterprise architect in the infrastructure space here at Anexinet. Here on AIM, we invite relevant industry professionals and subject matter experts to discuss topics that may help organizations take the next step in their IT infrastructure modernization journey. Our monthly release format will begin with one flagship longer episode, followed by occasional, mostly weekly, releases of shorter, less formal episodes we're going to be calling AIM Digressions. This week, we will be talking about Privileged Access Management, or PAM. With me today is the Director of Digital Projects here at Anexinet, George Contino. How are you, George?
All right, Chris, how are you doing today? Thank you for having me.
Recently, George, myself, and another Anexinet podcast host, Steve Brickman, sat down to talk about PAM with Thycotic Software. Thycotic is a security vendor with a number of tools that can help customers keep the accounts in their environments under control. We spoke with Katie McCroskey, the Director of Knowledge Management and Partner Training, as well as Larry Mogul, who is a Strategic Channel Account Manager with Thycotic. We'll get to them in a moment, but first I thought we could talk some basics, give people who might not be as well versed in PAM a little bit of a primer. So George, from your perspective, what would you say if someone asked you what PAM actually is?
So when we think privileged access management, it's essentially what's in the name itself, right? It's providing a secure method of accessing or leveraging those privileged access accounts, right? When accessing assets, applications, or even just to help meet compliance requirements that a particular organization may have.
So it's about management control of access to either a server or a service, a system.
Yeah, admin accounts, both on servers and the like, as well as help administer service accounts that may exist out in a particular environment, like, printing admins and the like. Accounts you don't necessarily think about every day when it comes to, privileged accounts.
Right, and it's about having eyes on all of those accesses.
Exactly.
How do you most often see it being used?
Traditionally, it's been on-prem within the organization, but as companies make the move to cloud and the like, you really need a solution that can kind of straddle any environment that you may have deployed through your organization. That could be both on-prem, in cloud, and the like. Right? Could even be SaaS services that you're consuming. Right? But those privileged accounts exist everywhere. So finding a solution to help you manage those, control those, audit those is a challenge in today's market, and privileged access tools like some of the ones we'll be talking about today, can help you with that.
What do you think is the biggest thing that PAM does to help organizations?
The control and access to those privileged accounts when you're thinking about that. In most organizations, probably more the small to medium size, it's probably a little less control around some of those privileged accounts than you would have in some of the larger organizations where they have the manpower to implement and put some things. But even then, more times than not, we see broken processes with the control and access of privileged accounts across an organization. So I would say the biggest challenge with that is who has access to those accounts. Separation of duties, if you will, is something you hear from a compliance standpoint, but in reality, it's not necessarily practiced in most organizations once you start digging into it. Right? So having a solution like this allows an end user like myself to just have his normal ID, accessing type things. But when I put my administrator hat on, it's not the same account that I'm necessarily logging in to do that. Right? I'm checking out an ID or putting an approval through, like a privileged access tool, like we're going to be talking about, get access, monitor, what you're doing activity-wise, and have all of that monitoring and auditing that goes with it, right? The ability to scramble or hide any of those passwords so they're not necessarily known. But again, kind of layer in those security levels, if you will.
Right. What about Thycotic in specific? How does their tool set stand out in your mind as something that is very valuable to end users?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I've seen in this space particularly is the complexity of implementing a solution. In the 2.5 years I've been here with Anexinet, I've had a chance to see a number of solutions. Each of them had their own problems, if you will. I won't necessarily call out any names here.
No.
But the first thing that jumped out was, again, going back to complexity, finding a solution that your team could administer, or being able to find resources, that you may or may not have if you need to bring on board to implement a particular solution. Thycotic itself is built on the .NET framework. There are libraries amongst scripts as far as configuring the tool to implement almost anything you need in a strong support background. Some of the other solutions I've experienced in the past just really never even got off the ground, in that the organization themselves trying to find resources to necessarily sit in that seat, own that particular product or deployment going forward in collaboration with any professional services that company may offer. More times than not, in that particular front, we were unable to find any resources that could actually manipulate or implement that solution, so that we were very dependent heavy on the professional services, which in itself was just not cost effective. Sure. So ease of use and ultimately, the ability to all the components to work seamlessly together.
Right. What was your biggest takeaway from our discussion with Katie and Larry? Was there anything that was new or surprising or merited reinforcement?
No. When it came to privilege server and the secret server, the secret server component for the servers, both on-prem cloud-based as well as the privilege manager components I had seen before. Mm-hmm. There was some of the other pieces that I wasn't necessarily aware of, such as the behavioral analytics that they also provide, as a component, and there was a few other components I wasn't aware that they had. But, the two that I've always looked at were secret server and the privilege manager.
Right. Any last thoughts or opinions before we jump into the interview?
No, not this time.
Great. Okay, on to that interview. Steve Brickman was kind enough to facilitate the interview because, as you will hear, my audio connection was not all that great. So thanks again for that, Steve. And away we go.
Welcome to either Device Squad or Out of Office or the Modern Digital Enterprise podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet Podcast Network. Kind of an experimental podcast for you today. I don't know if you know this, but Anexinet has several podcasts, and one of them is hosted by one of our guests here, co-hosts, Chris Hayner with Anexinet.
Good morning.
He runs what was Anexipod, which is now going to be called the Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. Right.
That's the one.
And also Buffer Overflow, the Buffer Overflow podcast. And other than Chris, we have George. Who do we have? George Contino is with us. And George, what's your role at Anexinet? I'm sorry.
I am a director of digital consulting with Anexinet.
Okay. And today we're going to be talking with Katie McCroskey, who is Director of Knowledge Management and Partner Training at Thycotic Software, and Larry Mogul, who is a Strategic Channel Account Manager at Thycotic Software. And Thycotic, they are the cloud leader in privileged access management. So, Katie, why don't you just take a minute or so and give us your background, your professional background, and tell us a little bit about your professional journey.
Of course. So, hello, my name is Katie McCroskey. I am the Director of Knowledge Management and Partner Training at Thycotic. And to be honest, I kind of stumbled into tech and Thycotic. I was working and living in Ohio, finishing up my MBA, and actually working at Progressive Insurance. Decided that I wanted to move someplace else and started looking around for open positions and literally stumbled upon Thycotic. At the time, We were about 10 people. We were actually more focused on helping organizations in the DC metro area build code better. So we had a suite of agile related programming services that we offered to local organizations, programming help, developers, and agile coaches, things like that. We did have our products available. Secret Server, which is our flagship product, was already on the market. But really, I would say at that point, we were a services company. I was the first woman hired into Thycotic. Technically, I think I'm employee number 5. But very quickly, we transitioned into a product company really focused on our cybersecurity solutions that help organizations secure all aspects of privilege. So with the market and the feature functionality of our products continuing to increase and develop, the market became more and more interested in what we had to offer, and the company really just kind of blew up. I'm actually not a tech by nature. I kind of taught myself everything over the years. I've been with Iconic for over 10 years now. So, through the years, I've just kind of taught myself the technical components and the security aspects of our product and the industry. And that has led me to where I'm at today, which is the Director of Knowledge Management, which is a kind of fancy title for I'm the trainer. I help our new hires, our partners, and our customers become better empowered and knowledgeable on all of our solutions.
Great, thanks. Larry, do you also want to give your background?
Sure. I also fell into technology a bit, but it was many more years before Katie, certainly. And through the years, I've looked at a variety of different technologies and worked with a variety of different technologies, dating all the way back to the beginning of mainframes, and then getting into virtualization and storage that included disaster recovery, and most recently, working with a group of people joining security and working for Thycotic. Some of the people that I work with and work for here at Thycotic are people I've worked with in the past. So for me, it was a no-brainer, not just looking at the technology, but looking at the people really drive an organization and lead an organization. So it was really a no-brainer for me to join the organization a couple of years ago, and haven't looked back since.
What keeps you interested in security at this point? It sounds like, what was it that sparked some interest for you in the first place, and what is it that keeps you interested?
I think one of the things for me for security is there's always something new to learn. It's constantly changing, as we see with machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI, some of the new threats and new technologies that are coming out. It's fascinating. There's a cat and a mouse game to it. I like the fact that we're helping organizations secure their environments, and we're not saving the world, but on some level we're doing good in this world. So I think that that's something that also feels good about cybersecurity.
For me, the way I look at the market, and I've been in a lot of different technologies, these days more than ever, security is everything. There are many great technologies in the marketplace, but if companies don't have their security posture nailed down and are proactive doing so, then it could be catastrophic to these organizations. And helping customers meet those challenges is really what drives me. When you look at some of the companies that have had breaches over the last couple of years, and they're big household names, right? Think about the resources these big companies have, and in spite of that, they're still having met with security challenges. And then if you look at smaller companies in the mid-market space who don't have the resources of these global enterprise accounts, their challenges are that much greater because they don't have the people, they don't have the process. So the ability to help both these customers in the mid-market as well as the enterprise is really what drives me forward working for Thycotic.
Could you give a little more background into, the company's history?
Sure. So Thycotic helps organizations secure all aspects of privilege. So, as I'm sure you guys are aware, not all passwords are created equal. And as we see with most of these organizational breaches, the target for hackers is privileged access. It's one level of access to, hack a salesperson or a marketing person's box. But as a hacker, that's not really the level that they need to get to the necessary data that they're trying to access to fully execute a malicious type of breach. And so that's really where Thycotic comes in. We have a flagship product called Secret Server, which helps organizations secure privileged access. So if you think of it at its most basic level, it's a secure vault used to store and delegate access to privileged accounts. But the real benefit comes in its active capabilities. So, for example, it can look into an organization's network and discover unknown privileged accounts like local administrative accounts, whether it's Windows, Unix, Linux, all different flavors, can help organizations find their service accounts so they can start actively managing those full, workflow capabilities in terms of controlling who has access, just-in-time access, full monitoring, reporting, auditing capabilities, but also, most organizations, when we think about, simple steps that can exponentially help their security posture, it comes down to just general password hygiene and making sure that organizations are controlling access to privileged passwords, that they're running long, strong passwords that change on a consistent basis. And that's a lot of the automation and capabilities that Secret Server brings. We have some other products too. Our Privilege Manager solution helps organizations secure endpoint and application privileges. So if you think about, where the breach starts, it starts on the endpoint, the desktop or the laptop. So making sure that there's no points of privilege escalation there for a hacker to exploit, really locking down all aspects of local security, and then of course applying application control. So not only do we see lots of organizations that are interested in implementing a least privilege approach, but we also see organizations leveraging this tool to prevent nasty malware and really ransomware attacks. That seems to be a large driver. Another tool that we just recently introduced onto the market is called DSV DevOps Secret Vault. So I'm sure you guys might know some developers, might have a few friends that build code all day. They typically focus on, or I guess I should say, they typically care more about convenience than they do security. So they have a nasty practice of hard coding or embedding passwords into their CI/CD pipeline for automation. And although this helps keep things fast, it doesn't help keep things secure. And so our DevOps Secret Vault helps organizations eliminate these hard-coded or embedded passwords throughout their CI/CD pipeline and really just make that whole entire environment more secure. We also very recently introduced a new product called Account Lifecycle Manager. And the whole goal of this tool is to help organizations manage non-human accounts like service accounts from cradle to grave. So if you think about, most organizations have a lot of service accounts. They have no idea where these accounts are being used inside their network. They're hesitant to, rotate the passwords or decommission these accounts. It creates account sprawl. It creates vulnerabilities. These are very powerful accounts within the network. And so the whole goal of Account Lifecycle Manager is to provide the capabilities to organizations to be able to manage non-human accounts the same way they would a human account, right? All starting off with the provisioning process, making sure that there's proper approvals and owners as service accounts are provisioned, making sure that there's a capability for periodic check-ins to validate that that service account should still be in use. And then, of course, decommissioning and end-of-life cycle type of accounts once those service accounts have fulfilled their requirements. A large focus of what Thycotic does is usable security. We want our tools to be easy to use, easy to implement, and adapt to an organization's network and their needs and their requirements.
One thing I always like to do is to tell like a chicken analogy or somehow relate chickens to the subject. So if we could just keep that at hand, that would be great.
I have a chicken coop analogy. So obviously it came out of left field, right? Never really associated chickens or chicken coops with what we do, but it is security, right? So when you purchased your chicken coop and you kind of set it up, and then you realized you wanted to make some upgrades to it, right? You wanted to make it better. You wanted to make it different. What did you do? I'm assuming you did it yourself, right? You looked at how you wanted to upgrade it, and you did it yourself. What we do here at Thycotic is really interesting in that respect, is that customers, when they want to customize a Thycotic solution, we empower them to do it themselves, which makes for a much more robust user experience. I think it is very unique in the marketplace. We are really the only ones in the marketplace that allow customers to make their own customization with some scripting capabilities, which alleviates a lot of customer issues. So just the same way that you're able to fix and improve your chicken coop, we allow customers to improve their Thycotic implementation.
Okay. So now I have to give my chicken analogy, because the chicken analogy that I thought of was the fox, or the mole, maybe the mole in the chicken soup, right? Because when attackers gain privileged access, it's really they're appearing to be a trusted insider, right? So the chickens don't realize that the threat is there, and that, I think, is a large issue. I mean, depending on the latest study you guys have seen, like the average dwell time is over 200 days. So you're talking weeks, if not months, maybe even years, right, before the chicken finds that the fox is in the coop. And by that point, well, all your chickens have already been eaten.
So is what you're talking about the benefit of moving to the cloud? Because one of the big things you tout on your website is privileged access management at cloud scale and speed. So is that the whole deal with moving from on-premises to the cloud, or are there additional benefits to moving to the cloud?
I think that, speed is a big one. We do see more and more organizations that are moving towards the cloud because of infrastructure costs, scalability costs. I also think, that plays a component as well. So if organizations choose to leverage our cloud solutions, there's very little overhead. There's very little required infrastructure that they need. So I think that that's also a component that we see.
You talk about secrets a lot. What are secrets, and what is secret management about?
So secrets can be anything, right? It can be so much more than just a username and a password. It really just depends on what the organization cares about, what they're terming, they want to control access to. They want to maybe remove from any type of vulnerable place, like a DevOps CI/CD pipeline. So it can be SSH keys, it can be product licenses, it can be encryption files, it can be PIN numbers or credit card numbers, really any type of sensitive asset that an IT organization owns and manages.
From a practical perspective, I think the best analogy that people might be able to relate to is something like a LastPass, a password manager for their own personal sites, the things that they log into. Is that the idea of how the product works in the infrastructure?
Well, I think of LastPass as a sophisticated vault. So there's, definitely a level of comparison, because for Secret Server, at its most basic level, that's what it is a vault, right? But the real reason why organizations look to purchase and implement is with the active capabilities. So to geek out for a minute, right, if we think of like the top 20 critical security controls, right, it all starts with inventory of assets, right, hardware and software assets. And that's where we see organizations start, is with the discovery. If I don't know something exists on my network, how can I actively manage and secure it? So Secret Server looks into an organization, it finds unknown accounts, variety of different types of accounts, and then pulls those into the vault for active management. And when I say active management, I'm talking about access control. I'm talking about automated password rotation. I'm talking about, making it very easy for folks to connect to these sensitive systems through our launcher capabilities. It's literally a click of a button. It's configured as a proxy. So it's very, very secure underneath the hood for folks that need access to these sensitive systems. And again, there's all types of different controls and workflows that folks can use as part of that process, right? So things like request for access, monitoring, keystroke logging, all that good stuff. And another big thing we see with organizations in SQL Server is the integration component. So, we firmly believe in defense in depth. We want organizations to take our solutions and implement them with other tech and security solutions, whether it's their ticketing system, their vulnerability scanning, two-factor, multi-factor, things like that. We want to be, able to fit in well and adapt to all organizations' environments. So it's really the active components, right? I do think that more people and personally should use password vaults in their personal life, but surprisingly, if you think about the gap there's still a significant amount of organizations that are trying to use LastPass for privilege access, or even worse, using Excel spreadsheets or other tools that really are not designed for the business, for the organization that has larger security requirements.
Is there something that's installed on site for a customer that then does the probing?
Yeah, kind of. So it depends on what we're discovering. I don't know how technical you want to get, but if we're looking for like Windows stuff, we're using WMI. We're looking for like Unix, Linux stuff. A secret server administrator would drop in a range of IP addresses, and we would connect machine to machine, identifying all different types of local accounts. If we're looking for hypervisors, it's using, VMware API. So we also allow our customers to leverage PowerShell scripting. And this is a large competitive advantage because, they don't have to come to us when they want to find, their AWS cloud accounts, or if they're looking for something in Azure, or if they're looking for something at the database level, SQL links, or even if they're searching their CI/CD pipeline for embedded passwords and things like that. So, the ability to take the tool, leverage PowerShell for customizations and discovery capabilities beyond just what we have out of the box is something that our customers really appreciate.
Coming from an infrastructure background, security is always part of, our practice from a day-to-day perspective. But with some of the solutions that are out there, the complexity to configure those things and the requirements for the consumers to ultimately leverage the professional services of those organizations and what have you, sometimes just prove complex to administer, to change, as your business is dynamically changing and the like. And those costs just keep piling up. It is .NET based. There is a very big library of resources that Thycotic provides. There are resources behind the scenes that if a consumer is ultimately having changes, trying to take one of those templates to manipulate it, the resources and capabilities of the Thycotic team on the back end to support some of that through deployment.
As you mentioned, like Thycotic, we're built on the Microsoft stack. You can pick up the hood, you can look underneath. It's just a Microsoft SQL database. You can tweak, you can harden, you can, there's nothing proprietary or unknown about the technology that we use under the hood. And I think that, we have gone out of our way to really focus on that usable security aspect. So, we empower our customers through documentation, through knowledge base articles, through best practices guides. My team personally, we manage a whole, training and enablement program, whether it's online videos or courses, or, we come on site and we, show up and we train customers on, best practices and configurations and how to, make the most of the tool. And then, you get even further into our professional services team. They're really, really focused on knowledge transfer, making sure that we're focusing on teaching our customers how to fish instead of just fishing for them. And our pro services team also comes with the best practices in mind, so making sure we're adapting the solution to be as secure as possible, but also making sure that we're valuing the convenience aspects and the adaptability and the extensibility that our customers are expecting from a tool like this. Because security should not be difficult. Bruce Schneier, complexity is the enemy of security. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that concept. So, I think that going out of our way to empower folks and make sure that things are easy in the tool. And then if they do have challenges, there's always somebody at Thycotic to help. We have a support team, follow the sun, 8x8 is standard, but we do offer 24/7. So wherever you are in the world, if it's between 8x8, there's always somebody to call and get connected to immediately for any type of troubleshooting or best practices or questions related to feature function. I mean, our team is really just focused on making sure that people are seeing value from the tool, they're using it, they're tweaking it, they're customizing it. It's working as they expect in their environment, which is crucial.
What's changed in the world that's necessitated this new level of security?
I think it's the sophistication and the severity of the threats. There's always something new. There's always a new threat. Literally 3 billion new pieces of malware introduced every single year. I mean, just think about trying to keep up with that type of threat. And then think about the future, right? Think about machine learning, think about AI, think about, quantum computing. I know you guys like talk about that stuff. Like, all these things are going to continue to increase the sophistication and the severity of cyber threats.
I think another part of it is compliance, data, just data privacy compliance in general. Right? When you start looking at some of the security elements that are out there, that organizations, both large and small to medium size, as they aspire to become larger companies and do more and more, most of the businesses you're touching with are requiring third-party risk assessments, security assessments that go with that. I'm about to do business with you. How compliant are you? Privilege access management, identity access management, and all of those things are just huge parts of all of those compliance. In my opinion, right, there are just solutions such as Thycotics where, you're implementing that. It can help you with your onboarding and offboarding processes, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that you can start to unravel when it comes to privilege access. But back to the main point is, looking at a solution like this can really just, you don't have to come out and boil the ocean. There are things that you can slowly do implementing this tool to really help get your house in order, keep yourself sane, from an administrative standpoint, and look to cascade out this particular solution.
And I think the story extends, right? One of the things we haven't talked about, vendors, third-party vendors and contractors, exactly, that need access to the system.
Do you see that as being like the biggest threat? Is there a single biggest threat?
In my opinion, insider threat, and whether it's on purpose or not, there's still external exposures. But in my opinion, I would think most threats start internally.
So
the insider threats and obviously it includes the vendors and contractors, right? We kind of still, in some cases, consider that the internal threat. And then also we see a lot of use cases, customers coming to us are very concerned about their service accounts. We talked about these human accounts, right, with people, with passwords, but what about these non-human accounts? And there are some very complex interdependencies within these service accounts that's very difficult to manage and becomes a very, very, very big concern for customers.
So how are you able to secure those? Is it through a system of constantly changing passwords or?
Yeah. So, service accounts, are you familiar with what is a service account? It has a job on the network, right? So it's running SharePoint, it's taking backups, it's running web pools, it's doing X, Y, Z, ABC. So really what SQL Server does, as always, starts off with the discovery and it finds any dependencies. So it finds the SharePoint dependency, it finds the backup dependency, and then it allows those dependencies to be updated as part of the password change process. So SQL Server, reaches directly into Active Directory, updates the password there, and then goes to all of those dependent services and updates the passwords as well. Now, what we really, provide to our customers is, again, the ability to customize to their process and their environment. So they can sort the order of operations, they can introduce pauses or delays as machines need to reboot or restart, and then again, allow them to successfully change these passwords. And tying back into the insider threat, a lot of these accounts are shared. They're non-human accounts, so they're shared across teams. And as people leave the organization, as people join the organization, they're literally walking out the door with the keys to the kingdom. So all layers of threats come in with these non-human accounts. And as you guys know, with more machine-to-machine, app-to-app communication going on, this problem is getting larger and larger for a lot of organizations.
I think it's important because this is one of the things that a lot of organizations just don't necessarily think about, onboarding and offboarding, and especially in the situation where someone needs to be offboarded immediately. Privileged access management, having a significant investment in that space makes it so that you can literally snap your fingers and person X is completely cut off from the network.
And what we typically see is people think, oh, well, I disabled their AD account, that's enough. But let me tell you, that is not nearly enough. And I think, again, one of the unique advantages that Secret Server brings to the customer, to the organization, is we have a user audit report. So literally, as the person is walking out the door, as they're being escorted out of the building, you can pull this user audit report. You can specify the date range. So maybe you go back 6 weeks, maybe you go back 6 months, or maybe you go back 6 years. But as that person is walking out the door, you're automatically, through the software, changing every single password that that person has accessed within that date range. Full audit, every single action inside of Secret Server is audited. Lots and lots of out-of-the-box reports. We also encourage customers to create their own custom reports. Monitoring is also very commonly used for access into like their DCs, their domain controllers, and things like that. So what we're doing is we're taking a video of that sensitive system access. We're capturing full keystrokes, any processes or any activities, any executables, anything that's going on underneath the hood. And one of the cool things that we do is we provide what's called a heat map. So if an auditor does need to come in and watch that session, they have the heat map so they can jump around to when the most activity took place, as well as the key log details. So, really empowers them, again, to have it easy, to be easy to kind of dig through the data and find, was this, a simple human error or something malicious going on here? We do recommend that folks deploy our Secret Server monitoring agent on all of their Windows servers. And the reason why is because of something called server-side monitoring. So if somebody does backdoor access that box, the agent is actually sharp enough that it will pick up on that activity, it will video record it and monitor it, and it will send that data back to Secret Server.
Where do you see Thycotic going in the future?
I really see our organization moving more and more of our emphasis and focus to the cloud. So if we think about AWS and Azure and the layers within these environments, EC2 instances, I see us building more and more discovery and active management capabilities supporting organizations that are moving towards the cloud. So we already kind of talked about how we have all of our, privileged access solutions in the cloud. We're, not only an on-prem shop, but we have everything in the cloud as well. And I think not only are we thinking PAM in the cloud, but PAM for the cloud. The thing to keep in mind is PAM isn't a project, it's a program, right? So there's always going to be new technologies. There's always going to be, new systems and machines and applications and tools that organizations need to secure.
How do you think that Thycotic and their products scale for a company that's very small versus a company that is very large?
There's a sliding scale of maturity. So starting with basic steps that can exponentially increase in the organization's security posture is really where small to medium-sized organizations start. If they're using LastPass, if they're using Excel, if they're using sticky notes, there's something better. And simply making that first step into a tool that's designed for privileged access management is really where I see, the first step for organizations. Now, our solutions really do scale based on the functional requirements. as well as the budgetary considerations of all different sized organizations. I think we all have to start somewhere, like, basic password security, changing them, long, complex passwords, controlling who has access. And I think that that's a easy way to start using Thycotic Secret Server and the rest of our tools.
I have one last question, and then we can probably let these guys go. And that is, now that we've solved the chicken situation, what are you guys preparing for the upcoming turkey apocalypse?
Oh, that's a tough question.
That's a tough one.
I'm at a loss for words on that one. I would need 3 minutes to come up with a snappy response to that.
So what? If you could clarify, what's the difference between DevOps Secret Vault and DevOps SDK?
DevOps SDK is a feature of Secret Server, and it's for hard-coded or embedded passwords and credentials or keys, whether this is in scripts or config files or inside the CI/CD pipeline, at a low volume. Okay, so if we think like 10 API calls per minute. Now, DevOps Secret Vault is all cloud-based and is designed for high-velocity DevOps teams. So here we're talking about like 1,000 API calls per minute. So very different in terms of the scalability. And again, it really just depends on the organization and their requirements related to making sure they don't have any hard-coded or embedded passwords.
Last year, Gartner came out with a top 10 list of CISO projects, right? Saying, hey, Mr. CISO, these are the projects for 2018 you should be looking at. And PAM, Privileged Access Management, that we're talking about here today, was the #1 project ranked by Gartner. Same thing for 2019. So clearly the thought leadership in the industry is, if you're not instituting a privileged access management solution, you ought to be, right to the security leadership. So customers who have not been looking at privileged access as a project, really ought to be kind of peeling back the layers of their security posture and looking at how privileged access management can help strengthen that.
And that's all the time we have here today on Anexinet's Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcatcher, and thank you for tuning in. Quick disclaimer, the views expressed here on AIM are ours alone and do not necessarily reflect those of Anexinet or any other companies that were mentioned. If you're looking for a company to help you with your infrastructure modernization, then I would recommend reaching out to Anexinet to see how they can help.